Hello, everyone, and good morning. Let's quickly start the session because you have another batch by 8:35. So we literally don't have much time. All right, so we were creating a test class for account trigger, but we encountered certain issues that time. It was although a very minute issue. I later on understood where we were getting wrong. Let me try to show you that. See, what we did is while creation of this account record, we have just copied this one, right? We just copied and pasted it out over here. All right. We pasted it out like this. And there's one more thing was active status, I guess, because this was about deletion of an active record. So I just added one statement like acc dot active, right? That equals to yes. So this was the thing we were doing in the last program, but I was not supplying the value. I was not supplying the value of industry, facts, and website. And without supplying these three values, we were trying to insert the record. Because what we were doing, we were trying to construct the test case, right, for this one. If an account is an active record, account is an active account, and if you are trying to delete that, so it would going to push you this error, right? For this particular logic, we were being building the test case. Now, the mistake what we committed that time was we haven't supplied the value of these three fields, and we have already a rule in place. Whenever you would not supply industry, facts, and website, which is actually this one, right? And if you try to insert such a kind of record, which account record, which don't have the value of industry, facts, and website, so it is going to, it is going to call an another trigger. So why this was happening, I'm telling you, was, something, it was it was calling that logic. It was calling this logic rather, and it was not calling this. So that was the reason we were not getting, we were not being getting the test coverage for this. So later on, when I was working with this, I realized that, yeah, so this is the mistake which we are committing. Then I tried this, right? Then I tried this. Let me quickly show you that. Yeah. So I tried this. What I did, I just have given the values to all them. Name is important to give name because obviously name is the mandatory field. But I have supplied the value of phone, I have supplied the value of fax, I have supplied the value of industry, website, and active status was tended to be yes. Now, when I run this program, we were getting the code coverage for this particular portion. Now let me show you that. So now I'm running the test. I'm running the test, and let me now show you. If I would go to the test, and if you go to the trigger handler, we have 80% of the trigger code coverage for handler class and 100% code coverage for the trigger. Let me show you that. But still, I wanted, if you can see that we are having 100% of code coverage for this trigger. Still, I wanted you to work on something for this particular class, right? Account handler, trigger handler, we have 80% of code coverage. Why? Because we just have covered this portion. We just have covered this portion. The portion which is used to see if an active account record is getting deleted, it would going to prompt the error. We have not covered this one. So I wanted you to work onto this. I'm going to give you the hint for this, how you will have to work, right? See, let's try to understand the code first of all. Even though if you have 100% of code coverage, and you can definitely deploy these two things, because see, it's more than 75%, code coverage is 80% right now, you can deploy this as well. And you can even deploy the trigger. Trigger should minimum have 1%. You are having all 100% code coverage for this. But still, I wanted you to work on this. This would be just an assignment. It's not required, although, right? Agar real time पे ये class होती तो I am very good to go with this class. I can definitely deploy this, even though I don't have the code coverage for this, because minimum code coverage for the class is 75%. I am presently holding 80%. Minimum code coverage for trigger is 1%. We are having 100%. It was although not required, just for your practice. Just for your practice, I wanted you to work on this. Take this as an assignment, although it is not required. But रियल टाइम पे। अभी तुम्हारी स्टेज क्या है? सीखने की स्टेज है, तुमको असाइनमेंट्स चाहिए, ठीक है? तो टेक दिस एज एन होमवर्क। आई विल टेल यू व्हाट टू डू विद दिस केस। पहले हम इस लॉजिक को समझते हैं, ये लॉजिक क्या कर रहा है। व्हेन वी आर ट्राइंग टू डिलीट एन अकाउंट, अकाउंट is having a lookup relationship with contact with a special behavior that if you delete an account, all the related contacts, they are also going to be get deleted. Well, actually, this happens with master detail relationship, cascade deletion. This is something called as cascade deletion, which actually is a feature of master detail relationship. But that is what it makes this relationship as a kind of special relationship, isn't it? So there is a cascade deletion feature between account and contact, although there is a lookup relationship. And we don't wanted this to be get happen, so we wanted to break this chain. What we did, we built up a logic in a way like if you would try to delete an account record, so we before deleting, before deleting that account, we are breaking the chain of, we are breaking the relationship between that account and related contacts. How this is possible? It's pretty simple. Inside in the contact there is a field called as account id. Account id. So that account ID initially contains the account parent account records ID, and that is how the relationship is indicated over there. That is how the relationship is described over there. So before deleting that account, what we are committing, we are just removing uh, that account ID from contacts account ID field. And after that, we would be deleting that. So what you have to do in this case, if you're observing one thing, before performing anything, we are preparing a test data. Right now, here as well, what you did, you have inserted a record, isn't it? You have inserted a record. Now, before deleting that record, between over here, I wanted you to insert a logic. First of all, create contact. How you are going to create contact? Let's say con equals to new contact, and then contact dot last name, contact dot first name, contact dot phone fax. The most important part would be contact dot account ID. Account ID would be acc.id. This is absolutely important. This statement would make the contact which you are creating, it's up to you how many contact you wanted to get. If it's a just one, create one contact, that is sufficient. If you wanted to create more, आप for loop का इस्तेमाल कर सकते हो. But my suggestion would be just create one. For loop लगाने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. तो यहाँ पे देखो, in between of this, insert account insert करने के बाद और delete करने से पहले, यहाँ पे I wanted you to create related contact. तो उसको contact create करना is pretty simple thing, like you just have created account is equals to new account. In the same way, contact c1 equals to new contact. और कॉन्टैक्ट जब आप क्रिएट करते हो तो उसमें एक लास्ट नेम ही ऐसी होती है जो मैंडेटरी होता है. सो अगर आपने वो भी किया तो कॉन्टैक्ट डॉट लास्ट नेम, इवन आप ये भी कर सकते हो, कॉन्टैक्ट डॉट लास्ट नेम इक्वल्स टू acc डॉट नेम. दैट ऑल्सो वर्क. द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट इज कॉन्टैक्ट डॉट अकाउंट आईडी इक्वल्स टू acc डॉट आईडी. ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट है. तो इसका मतलब ये हो गया कि आपने कॉन्टैक्ट बनाया, उसको रिलेट कर दिया. ऑलराइट. ऑलराइट. नाउ before deleting that account, the logic which you have implemented, that iterate all those contacts which are related with that account, iterate all of them, right? And then just contact.account id equals to null कर दो और उसको update कर दो, and after updating, delete that account. So this way you are also going to cover this portion. ये जो पोर्शन अभी कवर नहीं हुआ है, ठीक है? अगर ये रियल टाइम का इशू होता तो मैं इतने इतने इसमें मैंने डिप्लॉयमेंट कर लिया होता था, बिकॉज ट्रिगर मेरा 100% कवर्ड है और क्लास मेरी 80% कवर्ड है. बट आपके लिए पर्टिकुलरली मैं चाहता हूं कि आप लोग इस पर काम करो, ठीक है? चलो, टेक दिस एज एन असाइनमेंट. अरे यार, क्यों क्लोज किया मैंने? एनीवेज, नाउ लेट्स मूव फर्दर विद द नेक्स्ट थिंग, and that was like how we can write down test classes for the triggers. And second assignment, of course, the second assignment apart from this this account trigger, we also have created these many triggers. Lead trigger, hiring manager, contact, and create contacts. You would have to create, test classes for all these triggers. I'm not sure whether we have created the, but at least I have told you this in assignment, if I'm not wrong. I have told this in assignment. I have given you this in assignment that uh, for account trigger, I have created the handler class. And yes, for sure, I remember this. I have told this in the session that for every other trigger, create contact, contact trigger, hiring manager, and this lead trigger, you guys would have to create the handler class, right? So if you have created the handler class for all these triggers, the second thing to this would be you have to write down test classes. So see, this is a chain. If you have solved this, when I have given you this in the homework, if you did that homework, if you have done with that homework, you can write down the test classes. If you haven't written that, the first step would be go back and write down, create the handler class for all of them. And once you have the handler classes with you, then and then only, you can write down the test classes, otherwise not. So it's a series. It's a series. You cannot skip that. If you really wanted to have more practice on this, you first of all would require to create handler class for all of them. For all trigger, for every one of them, you have to write down the handler class. Thereafter, writing the handler class, you can go and write test classes. Otherwise, you will not going to achieve this. All right. And this is very important. I'm not sure what you guys are studying these days, but my suggestion would be like, even though if you are revising your admin, that's perfectly fine. That's not issue. Even I have also told you to the, like, okay, in the next month, we are going to end up with your, to most, I'm absolutely sure that I'm going to end up my syllabus. Probably Ram would take a little more time, but somewhere around in the September, uh, your entire training would be going to be get finished. So in the next month, I'm going to allot you the mentors, and mentor would start taking your mock interviews based on admin. That's why, if you remember, we had that discussion in the past that I wanted every one of you to revise the admin. So even though if you are doing the same, you are onto a right path. I wanted just to a little more burdenize you, that practice for what we are doing class, practice for what we are doing in the class, and at the same time invest some more time in the revision of admin. Plus, lightning is also going to be started. So guys, these days are coming 2.5 month or 3 month is really going to be, very, very difficult. If you would not investing that much of time, you would not maintaining your discipline, it's really going to be, very difficult for you. So at least 5 hours of study is required for next 2.5 month. That's very important. Try to understand this. इतना समय, इतना वक्त, इतना पेशेंस आप लोगों ने इसमें रखा है, और अब वो फाइनली वो वक्त आ गया है जिस वक्त हमको इसका आउटकम चाहिए। तो अब आपकी मेहनत जो है वो डबल ट्रिपल हो जानी चाहिए। ठीक है, ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, टेक इट वेरी सीरियसली, इट्स अ वेरी हम्बल रिक्वेस्ट, टेक इट वेरी सीरियसली। ऑलराइट, सो जितने भी ट्रिगर्स लिखे हैं, सारे ट्रिगर्स की पहले हैंडलर क्लास अगर आपने नहीं बनाई हो तो, अगर आपने बनाई है तो आप डायरेक्टली उसकी टेस्ट क्लासेस लिखिए। ठीक है, एंड इफ यू एवर फाउंड एनी डिफिकल्टी, दैट टू बी, आपको मैं एक और हल देता हूँ, आप मुझ तक बाद में आइए, पहले आप चैट जीपीटी यूज करिए, चैट जीपीटी यूज करिए आप। ठीक है, उसमें भी अगर आपको रिजल्ट नहीं मिल रहा, देन यू कम टू मी, आई एम गोइंग टू फाइंड आउट दैट आंसर फॉर यू। बट आई वांटेड यू टू बिकम अ सेल्फ सस्टेन पर्सन। आप गूगल करें, गूगल करने से पहले आप चैट जीपीटी यूज करें, आई सजेस्ट। उसके बाद में आप, अगर वहां से नहीं आ रहा, देन गो एंड गूगल दैट। वहां से भी नहीं आ रहा, देन कम टू मी। आई 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 एम सपोज टू बी द फाइनल रिसोर्स फॉर यू। When you have tried everything and you are not getting an answer for that question, just come to me in that case. But I wanted you to become a self-contained person, right? That's why I wanted you to first try with ChatGPT, then Google. If not, then come to me. No problem. All right. Let's now understand how we can write down the test classes for a batch. We already have understood how we can write down the test class for a trigger, It's very much important to have the handler class. Otherwise, it's very it becomes very difficult to write down the test classes for a trigger. That portion is already covered. Now let's write down. Let's understand how to create the test class for a batch class, which is pretty simple thing. Although there's only a small concept which you already know. So we have written this test class. We have written this batch class in the past. If you have remembered, create a batch class to update the hiring manager location and contact number. Location and contact number. Now, before starting this, I don't have time to ask you question, but still I wanted to know one thing. I would just giving you this command to unmute yourself. Can any one of you quickly answer me this? What is the use of a batch class? Quickly. What is the use of a batch class? One. What is the use of a batch class? Why we at all write down the batch class? If I'm creating a batch class, what is the most what to say? What is the most important reason of writing a batch class? No one of you, let's not waste the time. Batch classes are written when you wanted to perform DML operation, particularly on a very huge amount of data. Batch classes are always written to perform DML operation on a very enormous capacity of data. Why I'm telling you this? By using user interface, if you are using in user interface, right? If you are using, I'm just quickly revising you, although time does not permit you to do this, but I'll have to do. आप लोग बहुत जल्दी भूल जाते हो कोई भी चीज. So by using this interface, if I'm editing, if I'm inserting, if I'm deleting, undeleting, whatever I'm doing, I can just do this DML on a single data, on one record at a time. I can edit, I can delete, I can insert. By using user interface, one record at a time. By using data loader, by using data loader, by using data import and export wizard, you also have something called as an import and export wizard, isn't it? You also have something called as data import and data export wizard. But what is the capacity of that? 50,000 data import. You have this data import and export wizards. There are two separate tools for importing the separate, and for exporting. For exporting, there is separate thing. For exporting, there is separate thing. But the final capacity of these two is 50,000. 50,000. Up to 50,000 we can perform an operation. Let's go beyond that. When using data loader, you can do this with 5 million. 5 million. 1 million is 10 lakh, 5 million is 50 lakh. What is the capacity of batch class? Any one of you, quickly? What is the capacity of batch class? How much data you can import, export, the DML you can perform with the batch class? No idea, right? No idea. पढ़ाई नहीं हो रही है आप लोगों की, इसका मतलब 50 million, 50 million, 5 crore, 50 million record. All right. So now you can have an idea about why we use the batch class. So batch classes are always written to perform DML on a huge amount of data. Final capacity is 50 million records, right? अभी तो भी मत भूलना यार, please. चलिए. So we have created one batch class in the past to update the hiring manager record. Particularly, I guess these two fields, location and contact number, for every record, we set it to something like Pune or Nagpur or whatever, or contact number also. So for this particular operation, we have created a batch class in the past. There is already a batch class. I can just quickly search it out. So there is already a batch class that we have created in the past. This was that batch class. This was that batch class which we already have created in the past. All right. For this batch class, we wanted to write down test class. Because presently, if I would test it, if I would see how much code coverage this class is having, Apex class, if I'll go and I'll check it out, how much code coverage presently this class is having, you're going to see 0%. What was the name? Hiring manager batch, something like that. Hiring manager batch. See this one. Presently, this class is having 0% code coverage. This cannot be deployed. This cannot be deployed to production. If you are transferring this to another sandbox, you can do this, which is not recommended although, but you can do this because between sandbox to sandbox दोस्ती आ रही है. In sandbox to sandbox deployment, we certainly don't require to have any code coverage. It's although it's not recommended. This is not a good practice. But yes, Salesforce does not impose any rule while you're deploying sandbox to sandbox. Your deployment is going on between sandbox to sandbox. But definitely from sandbox to production, you would require to have at least 75% of code coverage. So how to do that? Let me now show you. Let's quickly jump to that because I know you have another class. And from today, your lightning classes is going to be started. I would try to precisely be on the topic as far as possible. Test, hiring manager updater batch test, right? I'm creating a new class, which is obviously going to be the test class for this. And let's make this as a test class quickly. How @ is test. And let's save it. You're going to see run test button quickly. Okay. All right. Now let's write down the test class for this. See what this class is doing. This is updating every hiring manager record. It's updating the location value to Kochi. It's updating the contact number to this particular value. So this is performing a DML operation. Yes, this is performing a DML operation. Whenever you see a DML, whenever you see a DML, whenever you see a DML, whenever you see a DML for a particular class, inside in a class or inside in a trigger, if you see that there is a DML operation is going on, अभी भी मैंने आपको वही चीज एक्सप्लेन करी जस्ट अभी. ठीक है, ऑब्जर्वेशन की बात है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं चाहता हूं कि आप मेरे से सुन लीजिए. हालांकि ये चीजें रियलाइज होनी चाहिए, तुमको ये चीजें समझ में आनी चाहिए धीरे धीरे. अच्छा, दिस इज समथिंग व्हाट इज गोइंग ऑन. सो वेन एवर यू सी एनी डीएमएल इनसाइड इन अ क्लास, कोई भी क्लास हो, कोई भी ट्रिगर हो, इफ देर इज अ डीएमएल इज हैपनिंग अराउंड, when you are creating a test class, you also would require to create the data. आपको टेस्ट डेटा क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा, याद रखिए. ठीक है, इसके पहले भी हमने वही किया है. फॉर दैट ट्रिगर विच वी हैव, आई मीन द ट्रिगर्स जो हमने देखा, तो एक ट्रिगर था जिसमें इंसर्ट हो रहा था, एक ट्रिगर था जिसमें डिलीट हो रहा था. तो इंसर्शन से पहले हमको देखना था कि वो फैक्ट्स का इंडस्ट्री वगैरह वगैरह इनकी वैल्यू दी कि नहीं दी है, राइट. दूसरे में हमको देखना था डिलीट हो रहा था, तो इंसर्ट क्या है, डीएमएल, डिलीट क्या है, डीएमएल. सो व्हेन देयर वाज अ डीएमएल, व्हेन देयर इज अ डीएमएल, आपको टेस्ट डेटा क्रिएट करना पड़ता है. So like over here, I can see inside in this batch class is trying to perform certain update operation by using a DML called as update. So if the DML is happening inside the main class, inside the test class, you'll have to create the test data. ठीक है, आपको टेस्ट डेटा बनाना पड़ेगा. So I'm going to show you one another technique for this program. Gradually I'm just trying to introduce the new things. So what I'm going to do is like, let me do one thing. Method to create the test data. ठीक है, I'm just creating a method for that test data. Public static void create create, let's say hiring manager record. ठीक है, I am creating one method, and inside in this method does not do a lot many things. This method does not do a lot many things. It would just create the test data of hiring manager. So if I'm creating it for the hiring manager, if I'm creating it for the hiring manager, uh, it's pretty simple thing, although I'll just go and copy the name of that. Let me quickly take the API name of that object, hiring. Go to details. Here you are going to find the API name. API name is hiring manager _ C. Now, instead of creating one, I would create multiple data. So let me do one thing. I'll just quickly define a list collection. List of hiring manager, let's say LST HR records equals to new. Let me just copy this everything. Equals to new hiring manager and make this as a default constructor. And now for integer counter equals to 1, and then counter is less than, or let's say equals to, less than equals to, let's say 100. I would be creating 100 records, nothing else. Counter plus plus. Yeah. So I would be creating, 100 records of hiring manager. I would be creating 100 records of hiring manager. So let's create the object of that object of hiring manager over here. So it would be like new hiring manager, make it at a default constructor. Now you have an object called as HR, and let's say HR dot name equals to, you can give any name, and this name, whatever the record you are creating right now, see, it's not going to be get inserted. First of all, it's not going to be get updated in actual database, and it is even not going to be get counted. It's not going to be get counted uh, in the governor limits. Test plus the value of counter. So that would become like test1, test2, something like that. HR dot contact number. I would be giving the contact number value as well. So contact number 8765432210. And then HR dot, the next is HR email ID. Email ID, I would be supplying the email ID as test@gmail.com. And then HR dot, what is left? This is an auto number field, is deleted. Location, general position, roll up summary hai, location. Location, I would be supplying as, let's say, Nagpur. All right. All right. Now, when this data is created, what I'm going to do, I would be adding that inside in this collection. We have already created a collection. Why we have created this collection? To follow the process of bulkification. I hope you remember this, that we does not perform the insertion of individual record, because in that case, if I would be inserting, the governor limit is 150 only. I can do this on 150. We never give any DML statement, any SQL query, any DML statement, any SQL query inside the loop. We always follow the process of bulkification. What is that? We define a collection, we add every data inside collection. Inside collection, how much data could be added? There is no limit of that. There is simply no limit of that, how much data can be added. You can add as many number of data as you want. Now, after adding those records to collection, usual best practice, if not of this collection dot is empty, if not of this collection dot is empty, this is a usual best practice to follow to avoid null pointer exception. If not of this collection is empty, I would be inserting everything inside that collection. All right. So this is the usual best practice that we follow. Now, what we did so far, I haven't written anything to test the data. Let me save this quickly. I haven't written anything for testing data. I just have created test record. How? You created a separate method. You created a separate method for creation of your test record. Now, at the end of the discussion, right, at the end of the day, if someone would ask you what this method create hiring manager record is doing, you can say this method I have created, this method is actually creating test record which are required, for this test class. इसके पहले हमने उसको एक ही लॉजिक में क्रिएट किया था. अब मैं धीरे धीरे आपको स्टैंडर्ड की तरफ लेके जा रहा हूं. तो अब सुनिए, ध्यान से सुनिए. और इसके बाद कभी भी जब आप टेस्ट क्लास लिखेंगे और आपको वहां टेस्ट डेटा क्रिएट करना है, द यूजुअल गुड प्रैक्टिस इज टू क्रिएट अ सेपरेट मेथड. ये कोई, देखिए, इतना डिटेल से कोई नहीं बताता, ठीक है. और ये चीजें आप धीरे धीरे खो के काफी समय के बाद आप सीखते हैं. When you start working in a real time environment and you start looking into the codes, जब आप किसी और के कोड पे काम करते हैं, तब आप रियलाइज करते हो कि अरे अच्छा, इसको इस तरह से लिखा जाता है. आई हैव सीन इट लाइक दिस. देन यू रियलाइज कि अच्छा ऐसा करना चाहिए। तो एक तो ये होता है कि आपको मैं जनरल तरीके से पढ़ा दूं सारी चीजें, एंड देन यू स्टार्ट कोडिंग इन द सेम स्टाइल, एंड लेटर ऑन यू वुड रियलाइज कि नहीं, अपने को उसमें थोड़ा सा बदलाव लाने चाहिए। द स्टैंडर्ड वे इज लाइक क्रिएशन ऑफ टेस्ट डेटा शुड बी ऑलवेज डन इनसाइड अ सेपरेट मेथड। इट सीम्स टू बी गुड प्रैक्टिस। और दूसरा ये होता है कि हम इसको खुद अभी ही सीख लें, ड्यूरिंग आवर ट्रेनिंग इटसेल्फ वी विल अंडरस्टैंड कि यार देखो इसको इस तरह से बनाया करो, इट्स लुक गुड, या ये थोड़ा सा अप्रोप्रिएट लगता है। ठीक है। तो टेस्ट डेटा जब भी क्रिएट करो उसको एक सेपरेट मेथड में कर लिया करो। चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं। नाउ 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 व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू डू इज व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू डू इज आई वुड बी क्रिएटिंग आई वुड बी क्रिएटिंग अब देखो, हमने आपको एक बात बताई है, स्टैटिक हर टेस्ट क्लास के अंदर एक टेस्ट मेथड होना is required. Static test method which is always void, इसका नाम रखता हूं मैं टेस्ट हायरिंग मैनेजर मैनेजर बैच। ठीक है, ये मेरी टेस्ट मेथड है, दिस इज माय टेस्ट मेथड। ठीक है, दिस इज माय टेस्ट मेथड। तो द फर्स्ट स्टेप व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू डू, अभी मैं चाहे जो भी लिखूं, आई वुड फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल कॉल दिस मेथड ओवर हियर, मैं इस मेथड को यहाँ पे कॉल कर लेता हूं। I mean, as soon as you enters inside your test method, as soon as you enter into your test method, the first thing it would going to call this method. Now, what this method would do? This would method obviously would provide a test record, not just 100 test records. This method would going to provide the 100 test record. In short, with this method आपके पास में टेस्ट रिकॉर्ड्स अवेलेबल हैं। चलो, अब टेस्ट रिकॉर्ड अवेलेबल हो गए तो फिर आगे बढ़ जाते हैं। टेस्ट रिकॉर्ड अपने पास अवेलेबल हो गए तो अब हम आगे बढ़ जाते हैं। एंड नाउ व्हाट द आई मीन नाउ वी वुड सी लाइक हाउ वी कैन राइट डाउन, हाउ वी कैन क्रिएट द टेस्ट क्लास फॉर अ बैच क्लास। ठीक है। ओके, यहाँ पर एक पॉइंट, एक खास बात मैं आप सभी को बताना चाहूंगा। देखिए, बैच हो, फ्यूचर मेथड हो, क्यूवेबल इंटरफेस हो, या स्केड्यूलेबल इंटरफेस हो, आपको याद होना चाहिए कि हमने ये चारों पांचों टॉपिक असिंक्रोनस प्रोग्रामिंग में पढ़े हैं। असिंक्रोनस प्रोग्रामिंग, असिंक्रोनस प्रोग्रामिंग का मतलब ही होता है कि आप बियॉन्ड द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कुछ जाके परफॉर्म करते हो। ठीक है। तो अब मेरी बात ध्यान से सुनिए, और मेरे हिसाब से तो ज्यादा अच्छा होगा अगर आप इसको लिख लें, क्योंकि आप लोग भूलने में बड़े एक्सपर्ट हैं। कोई भी असिंक्रोनस क्वांटिटी, कोई भी असिंक्रोनस क्वांटिटी जैसे कि बैच क्लास, या फ्यूचर मेथड, या फिर स्केड्यूलेबल इंटरफेस, स्केड्यूलेबल क्लासेस जो आप कहते हैं, या फिर क्यूवेबल, और आगे चल के आप सीखने वाले हैं एपीआईज, वेब सर्विसेज, एप्लीकेशन प्रोग्राम इंटरफेसेस, वेब सर्विस क्लास। इन सभी के लिए मेरे ख्याल 6 हो गई कि 5 हो गई, इन सभी के लिए जो कि असिंक्रोनसली एग्जीक्यूट होती हैं, all of them, right? The name which I have taken right now, like batch program, schedulable program, queuable interface, future method, and your web service, all 5 of them, all 5 of them. For all 5 of them, if you are writing a test class, if you're writing a test class, because all of them are asynchronous quantity, तो आपको जब भी whenever you are writing a test class for an asynchronous quantity, whenever you are writing a test class for an asynchronous quantity, आपको कुछ इंट्रोड्यूस करना पड़ता है क्लास में, और वो है टेस्ट डॉट स्टार्ट टेस्ट एंड टेस्ट डॉट stop test. So your entire testing code should always, should always be inside test.start test and stop test. And test.start test and stop test, test.start test and stop test are particularly used. These are two functions. These are two functions to bypass the governor limit while testing. Please write it down because these all are interview questions. They are going to ask you this. They are going to ask you this for sure. For sure. They are going to ask you what is the purpose? What is the purpose of writing test.start test and stop test? What is the use of start test and stop test functions? और आप लोग तो भूलने में एक्सपर्ट हैं, तो प्लीज राइट इट डाउन. Test.startTest and stopTest is always used to write down the test classes for every asynchronous quantity. Let's say if you are writing a test class for the batch program, schedulable program, queuable interfaces, or an API. So if you are writing, so the purpose of this is to bypass the governor limit. The purpose is to bypass the governor limit while testing asynchronous quantities. So they are used if we am writing the test classes for batch program, API is right for them. For them it is used. Anyways, let's me start with this. Chalo. Now, how to write down the test class for a batch class? How to write down the test class for a batch class? It's a pretty simple thing. Although I was intended to ask one question at this moment, but मुझे पता है कि आप लोग आंसर नहीं दोगे, and let's not waste the time. Let's not waste the time. I mean, I was about to ask one question. अगर मेरे पास समय होता और आप लोगों का भी फिर से क्लास नहीं होता, तो I was about to ask one question. बट मुझे पता है कि आप आंसर नहीं दोगे और समय खराब होगा उसमें. The question which I was about to ask, how do we execute a batch class? How do we execute a batch class? This was the question. If this is a batch class, tell me how I can execute that. If someone still wanted to answer, please answer this question. How do you execute a batch class? How do you execute a batch class? See, मुझे पता था आप लोग आंसर. Yeah, come on. Who is that?
Sir, we have to use start method, execute method, and end method, I guess. And
I'm not saying what is there inside a batch class. Yes, if my question
okay,
was what is there inside, तो आप बोलना था. आपने जो बोला वो सही था कि the
okay.
batch class have
Uh,
start method, execute method, and finish method. ठीक है. My question is not this. My question is how would you execute? How would you invoke this batch class? So whenever we wanted to execute a batch class, the step number one, go and revise this whole thing. The step number one is to create the object of that batch class. So I'm creating an object of this batch class, HR batch equals to new HR batch. Okay. The same way you create the object for any class, it's the same for then batch class as well. So once you have this, once you have created the object of that batch class, the next step is database dot execute batch. And database dot execute batch usually have these two flavors, usually have these two signatures. If you would select the first one, you will not get a chance. You will not get a chance to mention the batch size. And if you would select this, the default batch size, how much can any one of you answer? If we have not given the batch size, what is the default batch size?
Sir, 200.
200.
200. Yes, of course. Very good. So if you would not give the batch size, the default batch size would be selected. That is 200. Otherwise, if you wanted to give it by your own, you can give it minimum 1 to maximum 2000. It's up to you. I'm not going with that. I am just going with the default batch. It's up to you because this is just a test class, right? So, but if you want, you can even give. No problem. It should be between 1 to 2000 always. All right. So let me now save this code. So database.execute batch, and I have created an object of this. So this is the way to execute the batch class. They would also going to ask you this question. Mark my words, अगर तुमको ये क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछे गए तो मेरे को बताना कि सर जो आपने बोला वो नहीं पूछा गया. मैंने जो क्वेश्चंस बोले हैं तुमको कि ये पूछते हैं तुमको पूछे जाएंगे. अभी तुम्हारे ऊपर है बॉस, तुम कितना सीरियसली लेते हो मेरे को. जिसने सीरियसली लिया है ना, और जिसने वाकई में फॉलो किया जो मैं बोला जितने समय से आपको ट्रेनिंग कर रहे हो और आप इंटरव्यूज के लिए प्रिपेयर हो रहे हो, अगर वाकई में किसी ने फॉलो किया, कुछ लोग ऐसे भी थे जिन्होंने नोट्स लिखे उस चीज के कि सर मतलब बात हुई थी हम लोग की, तो वो बता रहा था मुझको कि यार ड्यूरिंग दैट लेक्चर यू सेड दिस, आई फॉरगॉट इट, आई हैव मेंशन दैट, बट आपने बोला था कि दिस इज समथिंग दे आस्क इन द इंटरव्यू, आई क्विकली हैव मेक अ नोट ऑफ दैट. आपने मुझे बोला था कि OWD पूछा जाएगा, आपने मुझे बोला था प्रोफाइल्स पूछेगा, आपने मुझे बोला था कि यार दे वुड आस्क यू दिस लाइक अप्रूवल प्रोसेस में इसका क्या होता है रोल, how would you set up the security, how many different levels of security you have, what is the difference between profiles and permission set, which one is more feasible to use. आपने हमको बोला था what is the use of a bucket field in reports and dashboard, how many different forms of dashboards are there, or what type of report you can create this, आपने बोला था हमको. You have also said us what is a relationship query, what is the meaning of underscore r in case of a relationship query, how would you fetch from child to parent and parent to child. You also have asked this, you this in what particular scenario writing a trigger you feel, what was the challenges that you have faced during, during all this discussion. So many times, I have said this is something they would ask you this interview, they would ask you this in the interview. That guy has literally that guy has literally written all those questions, and then when he got selected, we used to keep sessions of all of them, right? Whenever somebody would get selected, we ask him to come in front and share his journey, share his difficulties, how he has, so that all of you should get a motivation at the same time. You understand like the difficulties while what he has faced. So he mentioned that, see, this was the thing which Kasim sir has told us during that, and I just make a note of that. And 90, 70, 80% of questioning was there from this one. So it's just up to you. They would ask you this question: how would you execute the batch class? How can you decide the batch size? How to decide the batch size? The batch size can only be decided while writing database.execute batch. How would you execute? There is a method, database.execute. But database.execute method, before executing this, you would require to create an object of that batch class, then supply that object name inside database.execute batch. Here, if you want, you can give a comma and write down the batch size as well. What is the minimum batch size? 1. What is the maximum batch size? 2000. What happens if you don't give it? Default batch size 200. ठीक है, ये सब पूछेंगे तुमको, देखना तुम्हारे ऊपर है, तुम याद करते कि नहीं. नाउ आई हैव प्रिपेयर्ड दिस इज एब्सोल्युटली फाइन. लेट मी नाउ रन दिस टेस्ट रन कर लेते हैं. वी डोंट हैव मच टाइम because I know you have a subsequent batch as well. So I'll quickly go to this test tab. Hiring manager updater batch नाम की हमारी class है. So hiring manager updater batch, as you can see, is now 100% covered. This class is 100% covered. So we are having 100% code coverage for our batch class. How we did that? It was pretty simple thing. For writing a test class for a batch class, the entire test logic should be between start test and stop test, and nothing else apart from invoking the batch class. Nothing else apart from calling a batch class. I haven't did anything. कुछ नहीं किया बॉस मैंने. बस एक चीज रहती है कि if you are calling a batch class, that batch class must have a test data. So before calling that batch inside in my test method, before calling the batch class, before invoking the batch class, I have supplied a test record. मैंने उसको टेस्ट रिकॉर्ड, और जिसको हम ये सारा कोड उठा के हम यहाँ भी पटक सकते हैं दोस्त, ऐसा नहीं है. ऐसा नहीं है. बस मैं चाहता हूं कि इसको सेग्रीगेट करके रखो ताकि आपकी राइटिंग प्रैक्टिसेस दूसरों को नजर आए कि इट्स अ वेरी गुड वे. द वे ही क्रिएट द प्रोग्राम इज वेरी गुड. काफी साफ सुथरा हैंड रिटन प्रोग्राम है ये. ठीक है. सो दिस वे यू राइट डाउन द टेस्ट क्लास फॉर अ बैच क्लास. नाउ क्लास इज 100% कवर्ड. आपकी क्लास 100% कवर्ड हो चुकी है. यू कैन गो बैक एंड यू कैन सी इट फ्रॉम हियर एज वेल. Go to the setup menu, go to the Apex class and hiring manager, and then hiring manager updater batch class. And now you can see this is 100% covered. So you can deploy this to production. That's all for today. Any questions? Please tell me. Any questions? Any questions? All right then. Thank you so much for joining. Have a nice day.